This podcast contains discussions of child abuse, sexual repression and sexual abuse, suicide, racism, misogyny, PTSD and PTSD symptoms, and spiritual oppression and abuse, including guilt, shame, and fear. In most episodes, we will be mentioning some of these concepts in a general way without any graphic detail. If any of these topics or other triggering topics will be mentioned in great detail, we will let you know at the beginning of each individual episode, as well as in the show notes for that episode.
Rolling river of time, you've healed me in too many days. No regrets, no confusion, there'll be no pollution. I'm so thankful I've decided to change my ways.
Welcome back to the LEP with your host Gavri'el and Sadie.
Hi, I'm Sadie Carpenter, and welcome to the Leaving Eden podcast.
Oh, yeah, we're back.
A podcast about my life in an escape from the Independent Baptist cult.
Bizaptist. That's what we're
gosh.
doing. We're doing it. Sadie, what are you drinking right now? I'm drinking Manischewitz on ice. What are you drinking?
I'm drinking Red Bull with a straw, which is how you know I'm serious.
Yeah, you know what I was going to say about that? I was going to say, I like Red Bull. It's my drink of choice, and I drink it in the back of my Rolls Royce.
Did you make that up, or is that a thing?
I don't know.
I don't know these things.
Rhyming choice with Rolls Royce is like a very classic, like old school rap kind of. I don't know. Anyway, it is spring now. Is it officially spring? I don't know.
According to my allergies and Jonathan and Chuck's allergies, it's definitely spring.
Okay, well, it's spring now, and that means that it's almost wedding season. You guys know what that means. Pew, 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 pew. We're talking about, what are we talking about, Sadie?
So we have talked so much about the Duggar family, but I've been really wanting to get into some peripheral fundie families other than the Duggars, and I thought we might kind of ease into that by going down the list of Duggar in-laws, looking at some of their families, and doing a little bit of good old-fashioned fundie snarking.
Fundie snark doo 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 doo. Fundie snark doo 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 doo. Fundie snark doo 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 doo. Fundie snark. We have to at least go down the list and talk about all of them because, like, let's be real, I can't remember who is who. I don't know who is who.
Yeah, I understand that I know about who all of these people are, but yeah. I also understand that no matter how many times I tell you about them, you do not know who all these people are.
Yeah. So we're going to this is part one of a 2-part episode, everybody. So we're talking, there's too many people for us to talk about in one episode. So we're going to break this up into 2 parts.
Yeah. I started making notes on, okay, well, I have to make sure I bring this up. I have to make sure I say this thing. And before I knew it, I realized, oh, this is going to be a 2-part episode.
Not only is it a 2-part episode, but they're 2 very long parts. We're making like the Lord of the Rings. And
if we wanted to make the Lord of the Rings, it should have been a 3-part series.
You know what it's going to be? It's going to be like Twilight Breaking Dawn Part 1 and Twilight Breaking Dawn Part 2. Neither of which are movies that I've seen.
No, I have not.
Yeah.
I've seen the original Twilight movie on like my iPod when I was a teenager because I wanted to be rebellious and see what everybody was all up in arms about. And I wasn't super impressed, but that may be because I watched it on an iPod.
Yeah. Anyway, we're going to have to come back to that later at some point. I'm sorry. But before we get into that, let's see how fast I can do this. The Leaving Eden podcast is a podcast about Sadie Carpenter's life and escape from the independent fundamental Baptist cult, the cult in which she was raised. We talk about this cult. We talk about other cults. We talk about the real and present threat that cults and cult ideologies pose to society as a whole. And it's our goal to promote freedom of mind, freedom of thought, and freedom of religion. So if you like our show, if you're a fan of our show, you can do a couple of things. You can join our Patreon, which is patreon.com/Leaving Eden podcast. You can join our Facebook group, which is facebook.com/group/Eden Exodus. You can join our subreddit, which is reddit.com/r/Eden Exodus. Before we get into our episode, I want to take a special moment to thank our Faith Promise Missions tier patrons, and I'm going to do that slowly because I have respect to all of our Faith Promise Missions tier patrons, more respect than to do them like I am doing the side effects at a
the side effects
pharmaceutical
on a
commercial.
drug commercial, yeah.
Or if I'm the guy from the Mitsubishi ads. I got a message from this guy, and I just can't remember what it says. So I'm going to continue pretending that you're a very French man, and I'm going to call you Andrew Rousant. We've got Brittany, we've got Carrie R, Crystal Patterson, Dee Dee Keppel, Eleanor Donahue, Emery Fairlosser, Hope Norum, Jessica Tambo like Rambo, Kay Turwee, Catherine Schneider, Kathleen Moncrief, Krista Marie, Linda Morgan, Mary Martin, Rachel Bernatowitz, Rebecca Hoyt, Sadie's actual BFF, aka Morgan, Sarah Reese, Shane Horton, and as always, Wes C, aka Wes the Cowboy. And finally, the last thing that I want to say before we get into the main content of our episode, if you were raised in the IFB or a similar religious group, and you have a story to tell about missions trips, be it some crazy shit that happened while you were on a missions trip, or say somebody came back from a missions trip and they told a story to your whole church that nobody could believe, or that some people believed, and now you think back on and you're like, wow, I was an idiot for believing that anything close to that happened. Send us an email at leavingedenpod@gmail.com. We're going to do an episode coming up. A lot of people have been posting their missions trip stories in our Facebook group, which has been a lot of fun, but it's going to be me and Sadie and Dinah, and we're going to read your missions trip stories on the show and then make fun of them.
And if you do send us any kind of submission like that might be read on the show, let us know what your name is, what your pronouns are, and how you want to be identified on the show. If you want to be anonymous, or if you want just your first name, or if you don't care if we use your whole name. It's always helpful for us to have that information.
If you want to, I will call you Mickey Mouse. But Sadie.
Yes.
As you know, and some of our listeners know, I have never seen a single episode of 19 Kids and counting on 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, however many kids we are counting on this day. I have never seen a single episode. For this reason, I'm not the most familiar with all of the Duggar children.
So even after doing this show, you have not seen 19 Kids and Counting. I know you've seen some clips of it.
Yes.
Okay, but you've never sat down and watched an episode?
No, at some point, you know what we've been doing? Actually, the real reason for this is that we've been saving me watching it because we're going to do like some primo reaction content for me actually watching the show.
But I don't blame you for not watching 19 Kids and Counting. I watch reality TV for the same reasons that I assume you do, which is mostly to see hot people make terrible decisions. And 19 Kids and Counting just does not fit that bill, except for sometimes the terrible decisions part.
I am a fan of Love is Blind. I'm a fan of The Circle. I've been watching a lot of these shows on Netflix. Love is Blind, The Circle. Have you seen Too Hot to Handle? That one's really fun.
I have not, but The Circle is really, really good. I'm the kind of person, I'm very slow to follow celebrities on social media. Even some of my favorite reality people, I'll go look at their account, but I don't follow their account. And then I'm very fast to unfollow if I just don't care about them anymore, if their content isn't relevant for me. But that being said, I still follow like half the cast of the original season of The Circle.
That was fire.
Sammy won my heart. And now she's having a baby.
What a sweetheart.
I love her so much.
So because I've not seen 19 Kids and Counting, I find it extremely difficult to keep track of all the Dugg. Like Michelle finds it difficult to keep track of the children. They're her children.
Okay, but does your mom not do the thing where she goes through like your siblings' names and then eventually gets to you?
I only have 2 siblings.
I have 2 siblings and a dog, and my mom has been known to call my brothers the dog's name.
I mean, yeah, my mom would do the thing where she would start to say my brother's name, and then she would switch it to my name like halfway through, like when I was a kid.
I mean, I had recently had a baby and was sleep deprived, I may have called the cat the baby's name or vice versa at some point.
I mean, it can't help. You know, it just seems like you set the difficulty at like extreme difficulty if you give them all names that start with the same letter. Like she's got to find them. She finds them hard to keep track of. I would find them hard to like. So I know Josh, Jill, Jessa, Ginger, Jerome, Jaquarius, John, Jar Jar,
James, Jimmy, Jimbert, Jimothy,
Jacques, Joaquin, Juan, Jorge, John, Jacob, Jingleheimer. You know what J name they have totally skipped that they should have used?
What's that?
Jesus. There's no Jesus Duggar.
Well, maybe at the end of this episode we can do a list of perfectly nice J names that the Duggars didn't use.
We won't have time for that.
We won't have time. We'll put it. Maybe we can make a graphic and put it on our Instagram. Because I just the big criticism that I and a lot of other people have is that they were really repetitive by going with Jana, Johanna, and Joanna, but there's no Jacqueline.
I think you do that for like convenience purposes. So where you could just say, like, if you're the mom, you can just go, Jana. And then
and then all three of them show up.
Whoever is in the house is going to show up to help you with whatever it is you're working on. That's the move. But then like if all three of you are home, you can just be like, oh, I thought you were calling my sister. That's what I would have done.
See, it would work, but then there's a loophole.
Also, is there a Jennifer?
Yes, there's a Jennifer. She's one of the younger girls. She's like 16 now.
Well, anyway, there's too many for me to remember. This is not on TV still, of course. So she doesn't have to deal with any of that, which is fine.
So what we're going to do today is we are going to go in order of weddings instead of in order of age. And hopefully, because I like to do things chronologically, but we're going to go through every person that married one of the Duggars. You can look at this kind of like a cheat sheet for someone who's never seen the show and isn't up to date on all of these secondary characters, the people who married into the Duggars and their families, their brothers and sisters. And I do want to make it clear this episode doesn't contain a lot of new research. All of this information is really easy to find, and a lot of it's from Reddit. But I thought that people would enjoy a compilation of everything together, because that's content that I like to consume. If I listen to a documentary podcast or watch a documentary on TV that's about something I'm already familiar with, what I'm looking for is having all of the information reorganized into a format where I feel like I have a better overview than I started with. So I don't want to act like I'm taking credit for finding this information, because that's not what this particular episode is. What I hope I've been able to do is put all the information together in a way that is entertaining and fun.
You know, I think that like what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to say, I have an exclusive source on all of this information and no one else knows this. And it's really just some fucking commenter on Reddit who's just.
Yeah, I have an exclusive source. All of this is 100% true and came from somebody very close to the Duggars.
Or somebody on Twitter.
Yeah, and I know that there are people who do that, and I don't want to do that. So
if you know, you know.
If you know, you know. So let's jump in with the first Duggar child to get married. That was the oldest, of course, sex pest Duggar.
Speaking of, he recently had his sentencing delayed until May, which is good for us because I don't think I could handle doing a special episode about him getting sentenced right now.
See, I just don't care, because my perception is that he is more generally uncomfortable in county jail than he will be once he's transferred to federal prison. And I'm fine with him being generally uncomfortable, to say the least.
Just want to remind everyone that we did promise, and we have not forgotten this, that how much are we donating for every year?
I think we said we will do $5 per year up to $200. Yeah, that sounds right. Oh,
yeah. So if he gets 40 years, then we're gonna give like $200, right? Is that right, or is that bad?
That's right.
That's right. Okay.
Because 40 nickels is $2.
Yeah. 40 times.
I'm sorry, I caught you off guard with that one.
Sorry, it is late. We were like burning midnight oil here.
That's okay. Chuck's bedtime is later now that it's summer, so, and daylight savings time and all that. So now we're recording even later at night.
Yeah, that's fine though.
But let's talk about the wedding, because there's a lot.
Because this is one of the ones that they actually like was like a high plot line for their reality show.
Yeah, Josh's engagement to Anna Keller and then planning the wedding was a big plot point of the first season. The whole thing is extremely funny and extremely snarkable, but there are two big things I want to cover. The first, of course, is the fact that Josh sang a song to Anna called the Loyalty Song. And it's all about how, like, I will be a faithful spouse, blah, 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 which looking back is just so cringe on so many levels.
It wasn't even true. Like, he's currently in jail and going to prison for as yet undetermined amount of time due to the fact that he is a convicted pedophile.
Yeah, and he also cheated on her on dating sites and who knows what else. So not super loyal, but...
No.
The other thing about their wedding is that Anna's sisters and some of the Duggar girls made the bridesmaids dresses for the bridal party. Which
That's
on the
nice.
surface, yeah, that seems okay. But Anna wore her sister's old wedding dress, and I don't know, she got a shitty husband and she didn't even get her own dress, and that seems unfair. It was such a boring dress, and it just was not properly fitted to her. So she looked like she was wearing a white t-shirt with a white garbage bag for a skirt.
Well, she was also low-key getting like a hand-me-down husband because his first courtship fell apart because it came out that he was a pedophile.
That's true, but I just feel like if she was accepting a bottom-tier husband, she should have at least gotten a beautiful princess dress as a consolation prize.
Yeah.
Regardless of my feelings on Anna, which get worse and worse as time goes on, I just feel like if you have to marry a dud husband for cult reasons, you should get the nicest dress possible. And her dress, it wasn't pretty, it wasn't special, it didn't look good on her.
Yeah, she got a raw deal.
For real.
Ugh.
So, but I want you to hold on to that thought on her wedding dress because that's going to come back in a major way further down the episode.
Okay, so Anna's family, the Kellers, they have come up before on our show.
Right.
I'm trying to remember where.
Well, there's now a connection to the Rodriguez family.
Oh, God.
And that's probably where they came up. But the Kellers are pretty interconnected in the IBLP world to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting to me that the precedent was set of Anna being from an IBLP family, but then that wasn't the case with all of the other siblings and the people that they married into the Duggar family, because some of the in-laws come from these IBLP families, but we're going to talk about quite a few who don't. I think it's interesting that the first one was, and then so quickly they went to people who weren't from the IBLP.
So why is that though? Is does the family kind of like fall into disrepute and then their brand becomes diluted and then they aren't able to like attract top tier fundie spouses anymore?
See, I feel like that could be a part of it, but many of these weddings happened before the original scandal in 2015, and then several more happened before the second, more recent scandal in 2021. So I feel like it could partially also because they ran out of top tier fundie families to marry into. The only thing that weirds me out about this and makes me think that there's something there is that there hasn't been a Duggar Bates wedding yet.
Well, we're eventually going to do an episode on the Bates. I think we've talked about them.
I feel like with the state of current events in my life, it is probably a good time for me to sit down and watch a bunch of their show.
But anyway, back to the Kellers. They're like well-respected, a family of good repute within the fundie world.
Yeah, the Kellers have that street cred. They were an established IBLP family with 8 children, and Josh and Anna met at an IBLP homeschooling event. The Kellers' oldest daughter, Esther, is an interesting story. She is married to this guy, John Schrader, and the reason this story is interesting is because it sheds light on how Anna ended up with Sex Pest. I'm getting this story from a Reddit user, but I've seen them around the boards, and I believe I've spoken to them on one of those Reddit live things, and I feel like they're very trustworthy. So the Keller dad, Mike Keller, is a prison evangelist. So what he does is he goes into prisons and tries to help people find Jesus, which I guess is not the worst thing that you can do if people are showing up voluntarily to Jesus meetings in jail.
Yeah. Also, like if you're in prison, you're like, I f***ed my life up. I'm in prison now. And somebody's like, hey, Jesus will redeem your sins and you can use Jesus's teachings to become a better person. That's all right, man.
Yeah. And if the people who are in jail have the ability to say, F off and not go to the meeting, but they have the ability to choose to go to it if they want to. I feel like this isn't the worst.
No.
I looked up the ministry that Mike Keller works for. It's Rock of Ages Prison Ministries, and I found out, interestingly, that they're running a Bible college, and it's all online. It's one of those Patriot University things.
Oh, man. Can you get a diploma for
$15 per credit hour for a bachelor's degree, and 15 times 180 credits is $2,700. So a $2,700 college degree.
It's a lot less money than mine cost, I'll tell you that.
I'm halfway through, and I already have more than that in student loans. So I found that interesting. I thought that might be an interesting fact. But Mike Keller was used to the idea that everyone can be quote unquote fixed if they just find Jesus. He took his kids to jails with him to do this mission work. So the kids were also exposed to this same idea of anyone can be fixed if they just find Jesus.
So when Anna's potential husband is like known to be a molester, and it comes out that he's like an abuser of women, and he gets convicted for being a pedophile, like the belief is still, oh, well, he just needs to find Jesus again. And then
right. Either he never found Jesus in the first place and he's got to turn around and do that, or he found Jesus, but then he lost Jesus. Like, those sunglasses that you put in your glove box, but you can't find them now.
Yeah.
So the official Duggar story is that Anna's parents and Anna knew about Josh's original crimes against his sisters before they were married. And we don't have any reason to think that this is a flat-out lie, but we also don't know if they knew the extent of what he did or if it was seriously downplayed, because we all know that what Josh did was the Holt family didn't get the whole truth. They didn't have all the details based on Bobby Holt's testimony at his trial or evidentiary hearing for his trial. But back to Esther Schrader, in the years before Anna and Sex Pest ever became a thing, there was a preacher, Rick Schrader, in Texas who had a son named John. And John was, quote unquote, rebellious. He was breaking the IBLP rules. Specifically, he wanted to date. John had a come to Jesus moment somehow, and he decided that actually what he needed was not to date. What he actually needed was to just get married so he could, quote unquote, take care of these, quote unquote, sinful desires.
Woo!
So he asked his dad to find him a wife, which is what you do in the IBLP. You ask your parents to find you a courtship. So Rick Schrader, John's dad, wrote to Mike Keller and asked, hey, do you know of someone who would make a good wife for my son? And Mike Keller just sent them his daughter, like some kind of fundie mail order bride.
That is extremely biblical.
True. Also rather creepy. So the precedent is set by Esther Keller Schrader that you marry someone to save them from themselves. You marry someone to fix them. And I think this sheds a lot of light on why Mike Keller thought it was a good idea to pawn his other daughter off to the Duggar family to fix their problem child.
Ladies, if a man needs fixing, he's not ready to be married yet, right? Am I right about that?
If there is a moral or like integrity problem that needs fixing, then he needs to do that on his own. If he doesn't know how to put his socks in a hamper, you're probably fine.
Anyway, like, I'm extremely confused because, like, he gets this letter. He says, I've got a son that is freaking out right now. He's super horny. What should I do? What's the response? He's just like, here's my daughter. Go nuts, but they got to get married fast. Like, what?
But this is the same guy who would freak the heck out if his daughter wanted to wear a skirt above her knees because some guy on the street might look at her kneecaps and have feelings about it. But he's okay with sending her off to marry this guy to save him from his horniness.
Yeah, the only thing that he knows about this dude is that he's just like a horn dog for sure. He's just like...
It's some weird fundie logic.
Yeah, like, does this guy know what his future wife looks like beforehand? Like, has he seen a picture?
In all reality, I don't know how that went down. I would have to... So the story is that she went to go work at Rick Schrader's church for a few months, and they got to know each other that way, and then John asked her to be in a courtship.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, that's better. I guess that's not just
the intention that she was going there to get married to him the whole time, so it's not really much better.
I mean, the way you described it, I thought he was like packing her into a refrigerator box with like some bubble wrap and like styrofoam packing peanuts and just being like he puts her in a wedding dress first and it says unpack at the chapel. Like,
I mean, the intention is pretty much that. It's just the actual execution is not exactly that. But Anna, as Esther's younger sister, definitely saw this pattern of you marry some guy that dad picks for you and it's your job to fix him.
Yeah, just want to reiterate, marrying a man because you think you can change him is not a good idea.
The other thing, before I keep on moving with this, I do want to talk about John and Esther's children because they have a really interesting array of names. Their kids are Enoch, Alethea, Timothy, Nehemiah, Agape, Elijah, Charis, Sophia, Stephen, Isaiah, Caleb, and Joseph. It stuck out to me because some of these names are really out there, like creative names. Some of them are fine, and some of them are nice names, just like nice biblical names. And it was odd to me to see such a range.
There are some like weird, like Nehemiah. That's just not one that you hear very much.
So believe it or not, you are going to hear it again in a minute. So hold on to that one as well.
Okay.
Some of the Keller family, like John and Esther's family, has very much stuck to the IBLP way. 3 of the other older children have gone their own way, split dramatically from the IBLP way of life, and they have their socials set to private. So I don't want to involve them in this episode other than to say that one of the brothers did offer to financially help Anna escape Josh way back in 2015.
Wow. Man, things could have gotten so differently for her.
Yep, but she did not take that opportunity. Well, one sister of Anna's that comes up a lot in Fundie Snark spaces is Priscilla. She's married to David Waller, who is from yet another big IBLP family. He was present at the trial. I don't believe Priscilla was. I don't tend to snark on Priscilla too harshly. She and her husband are both super cringy, but also she got kicked in the head by a horse, so I don't know what amount of cringe she comes by naturally and what isn't her fault. So based on that, I tend to not judge her too harshly other than to just really wish she was not involved with the IBLP.
Ow.
The last thing I want to cover in the Keller family is, of course, the connection to the Rodriguez family. So one of the younger Keller children, Nathan, married Nuri Rodriguez. Despite Jill's constant drama, they do seem to be really happy and actually like each other, which is nice. They had their first baby last year, who is also named Nehemiah. So the Kellers have 2 grandchildren, both named Nehemiah. And people think that Nathan and Nuri are going to try to do the thing where all of the kids have the same first initial.
So Nuri she's the one that got in the car crash and then J-Rod put makeup on her while she was in the hospital to make the Instagram look better.
Yes, Nuri really seems to be Jill's golden child. She lives in Florida with Nathan and the Keller family now, and they really look happy, and I hope that's true. They did recently get a citation for not having the baby in a car seat when they got into a car accident, which is not okay. I always want fundies to break out, and I never want them to go through extreme pain and suffering to make that happen. But also, I'm very peeved at them for not having their baby in a car seat. We recently found out this new kernel of drama. This is from the Fundie Snark Uncensored subreddit. It was posted anonymously, so I don't have a secondary source. So you gotta just take it for what you will. But what we know for a fact is that before Nathan and Nuri's wedding, Jill Rodriguez was following Anna Duggar on Instagram. And after the wedding, Jill unfollowed her. A source on Reddit says that they were a former babysitter for the Rodriguez family and they were at the wedding and they know why. According to this person who claims to know the Rodriguez family, Anna Duggar made some snide comment about Nuri's wedding dress, and Jill overheard it. Now, as previously discussed, Anna Duggar has no room to snark when it comes to wedding dresses because she got married in basically an oversized t-shirt and trash bag looking dress. But this would explain why Jill was super passive-aggressive about posting on Instagram that Nuri's new father-in-law, aka Anna's dad, said that Nuri's dress was the prettiest wedding dress he'd ever seen. That would make sense why Jill made such a big deal of posting that. So take it with a grain of salt because it's just a person on the internet saying something, but I love this theory, and because I love it and it brings me joy, I am choosing to fully believe it.
Wow. That is serious question though. I know that despite all the preaching, about like sin of gossip or whatever, like fundies always talk behind each other's back. Like we know they do it, even though it's like the sin of gossip. Is snarking on the dress of somebody whose wedding you were invited to an thing in the fundie world, or is it just as bad as it is in the regular world? I'm genuinely confused by this choice, like why anyone would choose to.
No, this is rude no matter who you are. Some things are universal or should be, and one of those things is that you never say anything negative about a bride or her appearance at the wedding. If you think the dress is the ugliest thing you've ever seen, you look her in the eye and say, "You look so beautiful. Congratulations." That's it. Fundies know this. This is not etiquette that's lost on the fundies. If Anna really said that, she is an awful rude person. This is not a fundie thing.
I'm glad that they adhere to at least this standard of decency. In your personal opinion, as somebody who has seen extensive footage of Anna Duggar from watching the show and various, do you believe that this would be in character for her?
Is it in character for the personality she portrayed on the show? No. But is it in character for everything else I have ever heard about her outside the show? Absolutely.
Yeah, and we all know that reality TV is fake anyway.
What?
No way. There's no way that reality TV is fake.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Is it ever okay to criticize somebody's wedding choices as tacky, though?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Just not at the wedding. The idea that I always heard was that you never say anything until you're in the car on the way home, because while you're at the event, you never know who's going to overhear and who it's going to get back to.
Okay, I'm glad that because there has to be a line somewhere. So like if you get invited to a wedding and it's in a barn and it's like lit by candles in mason jars, it's absolutely fine for you to label this wedding as basic AF as long as you do so in the car on the way home and you're not at the wedding.
Yes.
Just making that clear. Okay.
Yes. And I do want to make the disclaimer that I personally don't care if things are basic if I like them, and neither should you. But once you're in the car with the people you came with, it's fair game, unless you don't trust somebody you came with, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Okay, like if I get invited to a wedding, I'm not so much concerned as with the aesthetics, but I'm concerned with the food situation and whether or not there is an open bar.
Maybe that's the problem, because Duggar weddings and fundie weddings are always dry weddings. And often the food situation is popcorn and cupcakes in a parking lot. But we're going to get to parking lot receptions as we work down the list of Duggar in-laws here. So speaking of weddings, I probably should point out before we leave the Keller family that Anna's youngest sibling, Daniel, is now married to Hannah Reber, who is the daughter of the people that were Josh's court-appointed babysitters while he was on house arrest pending trial. So as we're working our way down the Duggar-related people, we have arrived now at Jill and Derick Dillard.
These two are people that I have actually heard of, so that makes them A tier Duggarinos, Duggarites, what are we calling them? Duggarinos. Duggarinos.
I really like the name Jill Dillard because in my head I always read it as Jillard, and I do not know why that's satisfying for me, so I will not be taking any questions.
It makes me think of like a duck, like a mallard,
Yeah, no, I can see it. I don't know. I just think it's satisfying.
Well, her last name is Duggar, which has the duh sound. His name is Derick, which has the k sound. So it could be duck mallard. I don't know where I'm going with this. It's somebody else has got to hear that in their head. Like I see it written down, and I think duck mallard. And I see Jill Duggar and Derick Dillard, and I think Duck Mallard. I'm sorry.
No, that was a really great insight into how your brain works. Jill is my guilty pleasure Duggar, and I can say that because this is my show, and I can't get kicked off my own show for being too nice. That is not intended as a slam at the Duggars snark Reddit community. I get it. The moderators have to draw the line somewhere. Every community has to have rules. But I have to be careful what I say about Jill on there because they will kick you out if you're too nice to the Duggars.
Really?
Yeah, and I feel a little too positively about Jill and Derick for them.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I don't know. So I don't know anything about these people. on purpose, by the way. I have zero opinions on which ones are good and which ones are bad, or which ones are bad and which ones are less bad, except for Josh, because I know that he's a pedophile, so he's the worst.
So Jill and Derick, they met because Derick was a missionary in Nepal, and Jim Bob was one of his prayer partners. Don't ask me what prayer partner specifically means, because I'm honestly not clear on that. I just know that they called each other on the phone a lot.
So I've got a question here about this then. So if you're a man, if you're a young man in the IBLP and you meet some like older fundie man, is your MO going to just be like to go to this guy and be like, oh, this man must have daughters, I should get in good with him, so he'll like throw one of them my way?
Yeah, getting close to a man with several daughters is trying to put yourself on track for the dad to pick one of his daughters who he thinks would be a good match for you. Actually, I had 2 different IFB pastors that I know of who tried to do this to my dad, like buddy up to him so they could get their sons to marry me.
You had 2 suitors?
Apparently.
Yeah, so wow, you must have been like a prize hog.
It's probably just because I played piano well, and as we know from Dating with a Porpoise, that is a qualification for a pastor's wife.
Yeah, man, when that guy was like, what qualities do I want? She's got to sing solos, she's got to play piano. I guess,
and I don't sing solos, but I did play piano really well at that age. I was playing for church. So yeah, getting close to a man with several daughters is trying to put yourself on track for that. So one of the 2 men that was trying to apparently set me up with his son, I just found out about while I was in Alabama last month for my dad's funeral.
Really?
Yeah. I may have to do that story another time. The other one I knew about because he did it right in front of me.
What? Oh, no, like how does this go down?
Okay, I should have known that you would want details. Okay.
Of course I want this is what, tell me everything about this.
I forgot
story.
I hadn't told this one on the podcast.
This.
So my dad was pastoring in the St. Louis area, and this guy comes through. I won't be too specific, but he's like a missionary or an evangelist, that kind of guy that would be traveling through churches, raising support for the thing that he's doing. And he knew my dad back in the day in college. So he stopped at our church on a Sunday morning to like do his missionary or evangelist thing. He comes through. I was maybe like 15 or 16. I was playing piano for church and doing stuff for the services on Sunday. And my dad did what IFB pastors do. And he let this guy stand up in church and tell the church about his ministry, ask the church to pray for him, whatever. I cannot remember if this guy did the main sermon on that day or if he just stood up in church and talked about his ministry that he was doing. Anyway, after church, we did what IFB preachers do, and we took the traveling preacher guy out to lunch at a restaurant. It's just kind of expected that you provide a meal for people who come through. It's how the Rodriguezes eat.
They have a lot of kids.
12 or 13?
Yeah, so if the Rodriguezes come to your church, do you have to like take their entire family out to eat?
Not if they just show up. But if you invite them to come to your church, you do have to take the entire family out to eat. If they just show up, you have to have a very awkward huddle with the pastor and the assistant pastors about like, well, are we obligated to feed these people? Do we have to feed these people? And then you like hem and haw about it, and then you probably end up taking them to McDonald's or something.
That sounds super awkward. But like with that many kids, I can imagine that becomes a problem real quick.
Yeah, and a lot of the people that are going to be traveling through are the kind of people who have like 12 kids. So it's a whole conundrum.
Yeah, and IFB churches don't make any money anyway, so
right. So it's like a whole thing. Yeah. It's a whole thing. So we take this guy out to eat, and as soon as we get to the restaurant, he's just hovering over me, going on and on about he's got a son my age. His son is called to be a preacher. His son is so handsome. His son is going to Bible college. He's been praying for a good wife for his son. Boy, would I love my son to marry some girl like you who can play piano and who's going to be an asset when she's serving in a church one day. Brother Carpenter, your daughter is just exceptional. Is she going to Hiles-Anderson College? I've been praying for a wife for my son, and he's going to Hiles-Anderson College. Just on and on like that for the entire lunch.
No, so okay. So how does your dad How does he react to this?
I don't remember because I was so embarrassed by this man trying to get me married to his son who I had never met.
You know, he could have gone like super biblical on him.
What? They asked him for like 7 cows and 2 sheep?
No. Like, he should, if your son wants to marry my daughter, he will have to work for me for 7 years.
That's okay, but my dad didn't have another daughter to switch me out with on the wedding day, so I don't know if that would have worked. Rachel and Leah, by the way, was one of my dad's favorite Bible stories to dramatize. He would always read that verse, and I have to see if I can imitate him. Hold on. And behold, it was Leah. That's how he'd do it.
You ever think he probably thought like, oh, Jacob is like a complete scrub. And he just made this 7 years of labor proposal just to fucking get rid of him because he didn't think he would take it.
Oh yeah, definitely. And then Jacob took him up on the deal, and he was like, oh, I'm stuck with this guy, but maybe he'll give up and leave after like 2 years.
Yeah, like not only did he like take him up on the deal, but he made the same deal twice with the same guy after he just fully got bait and switched.
So I think they got to the end of the first 7 years, and Jacob did such a good job managing the flocks that Laban was like, I got to find some way to keep this guy around for longer. And then that's when he came up with the idea of, oh, I got it. I'm going to do a daughter switch on him.
Well, he was Jacob's mother's brother. Is that right? Yeah. So Jacob goes out to find a wife. You think that like Rebecca would say to him, hey, just so you know, my brother is not a trustworthy guy. I grew up with him. He's going to pull some kind of prank on you. You know, like he's marrying into the family. He can't just be like, you know, you could stick around and manage my flocks, and then when I die, you'll get my flocks. Right. Like he made this guy work for him for 7 years. He's clearly like a reliable employee and deserves to be like cut in on some of the success of the enterprise for his like hard work and dedication. And then you've got like a whole nother daughter.
Right.
Like you've got 2 daughters like that you can like, I don't know, you could trade her for like some livestock or something, you know, like, I don't know. It just seems to me like marrying both of your daughters to the same one of your nephews is not adequate diversification of your assets.
So funny story though. I did end up knowing. So the guy whose dad really tried to get him to marry me, I did end up knowing the guy at HAC. Like we were students at Hyles Anderson at the same time, and he ended up being one of my friends, and then I dated one of his roommates at one point, but I don't think either one of us was ever remotely interested in dating each other.
What's the car ride home like with your dad and your brothers after that, and your mom?
So as I recall, my parents didn't bring it up, like they didn't debrief me from that situation. I think their internal monologue was probably, yeah, that was embarrassing for that guy. He went way too far with that, but we're not going to criticize another pastor in front of our kids. I asked them about it years later, and their reaction was just like, yeah, that was kind of weird. But they didn't seem shocked by it, which makes me wonder how many marriages people tried to broker with them if it didn't really stand out as a weird thing.
I'm sure talking about like with you immediately afterwards would have made it way more awkward even.
I mean, how would you have felt as like if you were like 16 and some classmate of yours from school's mother was friends with your mother, and she came over to your house after school and all she did was talk about how much her daughter should date you? Because I'd imagine pretty awkward is how it would make you feel.
I having met your dad though, I can just imagine like on the car ride home, him being like, you know, Sadie, we should really get you in contact with that guy's son. You could marry him. You'd be a great wife. He's just making fun
just
of
like
you
making it worse because he couldn't.
Yeah, just
if it. I mean, that would have him in recent years, that would have been more him. At the time, I think he would have felt like he couldn't criticize somebody else who was a preacher because that would have been against the rules. He would have been doing it in his head, though. I can guarantee you that.
I'm glad he got out of fundamentalism for a long enough time that he could really let his inner comedian and prankster and like funny guy shine.
Oh my god!
But in my headcanon, from what you've told me, pre-deconstruction Sadie was like a 5-star recruit. Extremely sought after wife material. Nick Saban is like calling the house night and day, trying to fly you out.
So I want to go back to Derick Dillard.
If you want to play for the Tide.
I want to go back to Derick Dillard, or we're never going to get through this episode.
Yeah.
So going back to Jill and Derick, the thing that is weird to me is that Derick wasn't IBLP, and he wasn't even a standard fundie missionary. He was in Nepal doing medical and emergency aid work and also Jesus. And the IFB doesn't do that. They do Jesus and then medical and emergency aid if they absolutely have to not look like dicks. So I really don't understand why Jim Bob was prayer partners with a guy who wasn't IBLP and wasn't doing the kind of mission work that they normally do, like laser focused on salvation.
So what do you think that Jim Bob saw in this man, Derick?
I think Jim Bob thought that Jill and Derick would make a good pair because Derick was involved in medical missions type stuff, and Jill had always wanted to be a midwife and use those skills in a missions environment. And Derick was apparently in these many phone calls, apparently able to impress Jim Bob with his spirituality, his dedication to prayer and doctrine and that kind of thing.
So if you are like a patriarch, say you're like the patriarch of a big fundie family, you're like Jim Bob, and you're looking for husbands for your daughters, is it a little like trying to put together like a superhero squad?
Absolutely. So I've mentioned this. Oh, yeah. So I've mentioned before that it's odd to me that out of all of the Duggar children, none of the boys have grown up to be pastors or full-time missionaries. So I think Jim Bob might have married Jill off to Derick because he thought they were going to be full-time missionaries. He married Jessa off to Ben, who's a pastor, and he even let evil Calvinist Jeremy marry Ginger because Jeremy's training to be a pastor.
It's like one husband is going to be good at preaching. One husband's going to be good at medical stuff. One husband's going to be good at like PR. One's going to be like a politician. One's going to be like good at computers and use those skills for evil.
Yeah, I was going to say, you don't want to be good at computers in that family.
No. One husband is going to have a mind for business. Like, even if they're like not 100% right spiritual, like with their spiritual, like you can fix that. You can get that ironed out. You can get them like on the right track.
Yeah, I think that Jim Bob thought that Derick would get with the IBLP program and fall in line and be his missionary son-in-law.
Well, fall in love and fall in line. That's what they say. What else is flirt and convert, right?
Yes, or flirty fishing.
Yeah, flirty fishing or using your feminine wiles.
I was perplexed about Derick's religious background because I know it's not strictly IBLP, but what I couldn't figure out was how wide the gap was between his upbringing and Jill's. So I did some digging on this one. According to the Dillard family blog, Derick was raised in Lakeside Baptist Church in Rogers, Arkansas, which is a Southern Baptist church. Just from poking around on their website, they look like a pretty typical Southern Baptist church, maybe a little bit on the conservative side. When Derick went to college, he attended Eagle Heights Baptist Church in Stillwater, Oklahoma, which is also a Southern Baptist church.
But the IBLP isn't like strictly IFB though either. So like you could be Southern Baptist and IBLP. Like even some like Calvinists could conceivably be IBLP.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I wasn't able to find any kind of evidence that the Dillards were ever affiliated with the IBLP. I found Derick's LinkedIn, and that says that he graduated from Rogers High School. So clearly he was not homeschooled. So that's an automatic DQ from the ATI, which is the homeschooling branch of the IBLP. He was also a Boy Scout involved in the Model UN and a swim teacher and lifeguard, all of which are strong signs that his family was not overly conservative and not involved in the IBLP.
Model UN?
Yeah, the fundies think the UN is evil, so...
They think the UN is like the New World Order trying to bring about the Antichrist. Wow.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, Derick also went to Oklahoma State University, and of course, going to Real College is another sign that this is not an IBLP family.
Yeah, so one thing that we do know about Jim Bob Duggar is that he is a man of principles, but he is perfectly willing, even happy to break from those principles if for some reason he decides that it's advantageous.
But the question stands, how did Jim Bob and Derick become prayer partners to begin with?
Is the mystery of Jim Bob and Derick, like how they met, is that like for the Duggar snarkers? Is that something they have like theories about? Like it's the fundie version of like who Jon Snow's parents are?
Weirdly, no, but maybe somebody will post the answer that I missed. when they hear this episode. I didn't spend hours and hours looking for this, so I may have missed a step somewhere, but I just was not able to find how they crossed each other's paths to begin with. So maybe Derick was trying to get some Baptist street cred by having a famous guy like Jim Bob be his prayer partner, and then also hoping to get in good with one of the daughters. I think this probably had to happen a lot, boys calling Jim Bob to try to get a wife, because Jim Bob had several young, pretty daughters at any given time. And I know that I've heard from some Duggar source that Jim Bob would get calls because people would see his kids on TV and call trying to get close to the family to try to date one of his kids. As much as we snark on the Duggar genes, or the Duggar boys, at least, for having really bad genes, the girls are really pretty. So it could be that, or it could be that Jim Bob called Derick. Maybe Jim Bob was trying to look really spiritual by praying for missionaries. Or maybe Jim Bob is just so arrogant that he thinks that any given missionary in the world would benefit from his guidance and mentorship. And he wanted like a diversity hire from the Southern Baptists. Or maybe Jim Bob called Derick to try to get rid of Jill because she was always the outspoken kind of boat-rocking daughter.
Okay. Yeah. So the more that I learn about the IBLP and the Duggars, the more I realize that this is just like an huge scam. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just like a marketing front for all of like the homeschool materials. Like you just make your wives and daughters dressed like restrictively and then brainwash them into saying how happy they are, so people will buy into this whole lifestyle and then just like continually pay tons and tons and tons and tons of money. This is so nuts.
Honestly, it reminds me of certain MLMs, especially the health and wellness ones, because they will say that their product can help with anything. Like, you got migraines, Plexus. Need to lose weight, Plexus. Cramps, IBS, anger issues, depression, stubbed your toe, Plexus. And the IBLP is the same way. They promise that they can fix any problem you might have. If you've got an issue, the IBLP has a solution. But you have to give us money.
The solution is give us money, or no, actually the solution is be pregnant for 20 years straight.
Yes, and give us money so that we can remind you to be pregnant for 20 years straight.
R.I.P. your uterus.
Not my uterus. My uterus is good.
Okay, so here's a question for you. Here's another question. When you were growing up, how did you view people who were IBLP, who were in that?
My dad always called them Gothardites, by which he was criticizing them for following a person more than the scripture. We didn't separate from them in the fundie terms. We associated with plenty of people who were IBLP. I knew a lot of IBLP kids from the fine arts competition I did at SM Davis's church. I also encountered them here and there at like summer camp, youth conferences, camp meetings, that kind of thing. But our view of them was that we followed the scripture because we did not realize that we actually followed Jack Hyles, not the scripture. But we thought, oh, we're the ones who's following the Bible. They're following Bill Gothard instead of following God.
So you didn't see them as like more pure or just like able to be more strict, or what was?
No, it was more like they take certain things too far, but they're doing their best. Specifically clothing and courtship. I was raised with the same concept of don't give pieces of your heart away to people until you meet your spouse. But for the IFB, that meant don't date indiscriminately. Don't date somebody you couldn't see yourself marrying. Don't move forward into a serious relationship without praying about it and getting counseling. And don't kiss or hold hands until your wedding day. For the IBLP, that same don't give pieces of your heart away concept means only have very limited contact with the opposite gender, don't date, don't really get to know anyone, and have your courtship with your spouse be your first and only relationship.
So it's almost like, so you guys are like regular vegans who just don't want to hurt animals, you know what I'm saying? And the IBLP are like raw vegan and sugar-free and gluten-free, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, which, because it all seems like, oh, that's extra, because those things like you don't really have to do if you want to protect the animals. And not to in any way compare being vegan to being a fundie, because...
But that's an excellent analogy, because we didn't think that they were wrong. We just thought that they were trying harder than necessary to be right. And as I've said before, I was super jealous of the IBLP kids because they got to hold hands before marriage. I did not understand how much more intense the IBLP was for people growing up in it. I actually thought that the Duggars were really liberal with their side hugs and hand holding.
Side hugs, man. Side hugs that get you almost expelled from cult college. Oh,
Well, we're going to talk about a whole bunch more side hugs here. But before we do that, let's go take up the offering. Let's come back and let's get into some side hugs. Hey, Sadie here. If this is your first time listening to the Leaving Eden podcast, make sure you go back and check out episode 57. It's a primer episode for new listeners. That episode tells my personal story and gives you all the terms and information that you'll need to know going forward. Also, check out our cult true crime series, The First Family of Fundamentalism, so that you can get the whole cult story. If you like our show, you can support us by joining our Patreon, where we have extended and uncensored episodes as well as other bonus content available. You can also join in the discussion in our Facebook group. That group is called Eden Exodus. Tell a friend, tell a family member, tell your worst enemy. The Leaving Eden podcast is a fully independent podcast, and we really appreciate your support. Now, back to the show.
we are Bizak. Oh, I don't know where that came from. What are we talking about? We're talking about Jill and Derick, and marriage is what brings us together today.
Jill and Derick got married way back in 2014. Jill was the second Duggar and the first Duggar daughter to get married by just a couple months. Jessa got married later in the same year. So there are a couple of, and that started the whole just entire line of Duggar children. Just a lot of times there's 2 in a year, which is just a lot. There are a couple wedding details that I want to hit from Jill and Derick's wedding.
Are these details snarkable?
Yes, possibly. But remember, this is my guilty pleasure, Duggar, so you're going to have to be the mean one. Poor Jill. I feel like she actually has a good bit of personality, and it was so squashed by the Duggars and the IBLP. So she tried to show it in her wedding by famously going barefoot for the ceremony. She also had an outdoor reception and Michelle's wedding dress on display.
There isn't anything wrong with an outdoor wedding, is there?
No, I don't think so.
Barefoot? No? I mean, you might step on a bee.
Well, she was barefoot inside.
Oh, okay. Well,
which is
still
fine. I feel like.
And they don't have dancing, so you're not going to like.
No, I feel like I would either do a shoes on inside wedding or a shoes off outside wedding. I wasn't the biggest fan of the shoes off inside thing.
Shoes off inside is a little okay. I'll let it slide though. That's not like a.
So I think what's snarkable is that is the low bar for being super unique at your wedding in Fundie world. I think most people, if you say, "Oh, their wedding was really out there, it was really unique," most people would think of like the Portlandia episode with the big nylon parachute and all the chairs in a circle, not wearing shoes.
I take it that no Duggar weddings begin with a land acknowledgement.
I don't think so.
That's what happens if you get married in Portland. You go to a wedding in Portland, it begins with a land acknowledgement.
Portland has become Portlandia in all of the lampoonable ways. And in none of the like beautiful, peaceful place to live ways. So Jill is one of.
What's wrong with land acknowledgements, man? I don't
think there's anything wrong with them. I just wish, like, along with that, we also had like beautiful streets and communities, and the local government could do something about safety and the homelessness epidemic in the city.
If I'm getting married, maybe the thing that I don't want to think about is genocide. That's all I'm going to say.
See, I have not been to a wedding with a land acknowledgement, although I've been to quite a few events that had them. So I don't want to give my opinion on the wedding because I haven't seen it. I feel like with many things along those lines, there is a tactful and appropriate way to do such a thing. And then there is a way to do such a thing that it takes the attention away from what you're actually there for.
Also, the thing that I just realized was that I'm Jewish, so like there is absolutely going to like be an undertone of genocide at my wedding.
And you're just realizing that.
Yeah, I said I don't want to think about genocide at my wedding. And I'm like, oh wait, I'm Jewish. I think about genocide every fucking day.
So Jill is one of the Duggar girls. Speaking of terrible things, Jill is one of the Duggar girls who has come out as one of Josh's original victims. But she got married just before the scandal broke, which makes it incredibly gross that Josh was the MC for her reception. And in his speech, he referred to her as a tattletale. I feel bad for her for that. Imagine having your secret trauma that you're not allowed to talk about get dragged up like that on your wedding day.
So he called her a tattletale at her wedding in reference to her getting him in trouble because he molested her.
Yep, in front of 1,000 people, most of whom did not know what he was referring to on her wedding day.
What the What man? I knew that Josh Duggar was literally the worst because he is I don't know how many times do I have to say it? He is currently in jail awaiting sentencing for being a pedophile. But like, what the
this is why we hate him, because it's the original story that we were sold is like, oh, he was a young boy and he was too curious about girls and he sinned. But it's not just that he was a teenager and molested his siblings who were small children. It is also that he gloated about it to their face for years. Like, he seemingly enjoyed continuing to reopen that wound and cause more pain. So as the details of the original molestation scandal and then the Ashley Madison scandal broke and 19 Kids and Counting got canceled and then Counting On started, Jill was a central figure in all of that. And she and Derick started showing little signs of breaking away from the main IBLP teachings pretty early.
So how long was it between like them getting married and like them starting to break out?
Not very long at all, especially in fundie time, because they got married in June 2014, immediately got pregnant with their first kid, had their first kid in April 2015. Then May 2015, the original scandal broke and 19 Kids and Counting got canceled, which poor Jill, to have that happen a month after you have a baby, that sucks. Oof. And then the Megyn Kelly interview where Jill and other sisters gave very scripted answers about forgiveness was that same summer of 2015.
So Derick was never really in the whole IBLP thing for long to begin with.
No, because I think from later interviews that Jill has given, they went to therapy and started rethinking things really quickly after that Megyn Kelly interview summer of 2015. It just didn't show up publicly until around 2018. That's when Jill posted pictures where she had gotten a nose ring and pictures of her in pants started to pop up online. I am 99% sure that Jill was the first Duggar daughter to wear pants in public.
So in your experience, how common is it for like a young woman raised in fundamentalism to get married and then start to break out with her husband like soon thereafter? Marriage becomes the path to escaping being like under your father's control.
I think you have to consider that women who are raised fundamentalist are trained not to have thoughts or goals of their own. They're trained to completely depend on a man for all of that. So someone like Jill, I'm positive that she had thoughts that were contrary to the IBLP all along. Like, I had thoughts that were contrary to the IFB from the time I was a child, but she just didn't have any pathway to express those thoughts or any option to try to do something differently. She was just stuck doing whatever her father said to do. So when she got married, she was now transferred over to doing whatever her husband thought, not what her dad thought. And it just so happens that Derick came from this relatively more normal family, and Derick is probably complementarian in his beliefs. So Derick is probably more along the lines of the husband has the final say, but couples should make decisions together and the wife should get a real voice in that process. So it could be that he sat her down and said, I don't care if you wear jeans, do whatever you think God wants you to do. Or it could even be, and I would hope that it is, that Jill feels safe enough with him that she approached him at some point like, husband dear, may I please wear jeans? And he was like, of course, why are you asking me? I think it's fine, but do whatever God wants you to do. And I do think that Jill and Derick are a pretty good match. You can tell by the way that they look at each other that there is real affection there. And I would think and I would hope that she does feel safe with him on that level.
So we've heard from like countless listeners though, with it, like they're having independent thoughts, right? I mean, because you're saying like you're taught not to have independent. Like we know that we know even from your story, women are going to have independent thoughts. But like you're getting married at 20, 21, 22, 23. A lot of them basically got coerced into marriages. A lot of the people that we hear from, and you know, after a year or two, you've got a child, maybe 2 children. And then even more things start like are continually tying them back to the community, and then there's no way out, and there's no way out, and then eventually, I don't know. It's nice to see that sometimes, you know, a woman gets married, and instead of just being like, okay, now pop out like 1 million children and erase your brain, you know, sometimes she's like, okay, maybe we take a step back from this. This is like my tick it out. Yeah.
I think that's dependent on the integrity and the true character of the man that she marries. Because if he's never taken half a second to rethink this, I have to be in charge of everything mindset, she is going to get in that cycle where she's got children, she's dependent on the community for childcare, she's dependent on her husband, financially completely dependent, and then just there isn't a good pathway out like we've talked about with Anna. So I think a lot of it depends on the nature of the man that she ended up married to, which of course she has no way of knowing until they're already married. So it's kind of blind luck.
Yeah. Whew.
So Jill and Derick, they got married with the intention of doing mission work. They have done some mission work, but they are back in Arkansas now, and they've been going through deconstruction. And it has just been long and difficult and slow for them. Around the same time as the nose ring and the pants, just when people were ready to jump on the Jill and Derick stan train, Derick just went on a really unfortunate transphobic Twitter rant and cyberbullied a child. And so that was Jazz Jennings. You may have heard her name. She's now a young adult. But at the time, she was a teenage transgender girl, and she got a reality show about her life after coming out, like what it's like to be a trans teenager, that sort of thing, on TLC, which is the same network that Counting On was airing on at the time. And Derick was really upset about having to share a television network with a trans person and just went off on Jazz on Twitter.
As great as I think it is that transgender representation is on television, especially for like young people, I would not want to be a transgender teenager in the public eye in any way. Absolutely not. No, thank you. Not for me.
Yeah, same here. So Jazz is a tough cookie, and I'm glad that her story, I haven't seen any episodes of her show, but I'm glad that her story is being told, and I'm glad that this representation exists, but I know that she just takes all kind of heat. And I don't get that, because if you believe that what she's doing with her life, living as who she really is a sin, but you supposedly love her and care about her and would want her to become a Christian, the answer is not to bully her and make her think that all Christians are hateful.
Also, cyberbullying people who are legally children when you are a grown adult is like garbage tier behavior no matter what. But just like adding the extra layer of bigotry on, it's like a trash parfait.
It's really disturbing. And Jill and Derick have just not deconstructed any of these beliefs about LGBT people yet. And the longer that time goes on, the more I'm just like, come on, you two, you can do it. You can work on this. Come on. Just for the sake of being specific, Derick said that, quote, transgender is a myth, and continually misgendered Jazz while tweeting about her. And purposely misgendering someone is not something I'll stand for, because, like certain slurs, that can and has and does lead to real world violence. Having an opinion is a-okay, even if it's a trash opinion, but expressing it in words that have high potential to incite violence is not okay. More recently, they did say that they would be open to having LGBT friends, and they feel like they're supposed to love everyone and be loving to everyone, even if they disagree with them. And that is a station that a lot of us visit on the road to deconstruction. I have been to that station, so no judgment for passing through that point of view, but I want to stan Jill and Derick so hard, and there are just a few things they really dig their heels into. I think there's hope for them to continue to work through this stuff. I really want them to.
If I were a queer person, if I were an LGBTQ person, I don't think that I would probably want to be friends with Jill and Derick. Personally.
Yeah, I don't know where they're going to be finding these hypothetical gay friends.
Like, it always seems like that's people's last holdout. You know what I'm saying? When it comes to transphobia, they can like accept like everything. And then like when it comes to transgender people, they're just like, no, it's too weird. I don't like, you know,
it's that, or it's social welfare programs and anti-capitalism. Those are the two things that seem to always be the last one to break, which is interesting because it makes you wonder if that's just because those are the things that are programmed the hardest into people. I've gotten into a lot of conversations about the idea of solving homelessness with housing for all programs, and I've taken a lot of flack from people who thought that they had deconstructed everything, but they suddenly realized that they hadn't when I brought up the idea of just giving people places to live.
Well, especially like where do we live? We live somewhere where like homeless is just like out of control. Like, would you rather like? I mean, I don't know about you. Like, we live in the same neighborhood, but like you walk down the sidewalk between me and my grocery store, you pass like at least 5, 6, 7 people living under like a tarp, various tarps, tents, like on the sidewalk. You know, would you rather see that, or would you rather not see that and have them somewhere that's like protected from the elements? You know what I'm saying? Like, even if it's my tax dollars, like, it's worth it to me.
I feel like the bootstrap ideas really seem unproductive when you see the extent of homelessness in Portland every day. Like, when you pass by tents and camps literally every time you leave the house for years, when you know homeless people, when there are people when it's a safe situation that you've gotten to know and have a conversation with, and when you see the range of different reasons that people become homeless, for me, that really broke me out of the idea of, oh, they just don't want to work, or that pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality. I said this, I think, in the How to Break Somebody Out of a Cult episode. Of course, I want everybody to think like me, because that's a human trait. Every human wants everybody to think like them. But I try to be realistic, and I want to understand that not everybody is going to come to the point that I come to, and it's a more realistic goal to get people out of hateful and harmful views. Jill and Derick, they are so close to me feeling like, oh, they've really gotten out, like they're done. They've come about as far as you can expect them to come. But they're really, the issues are, there was some like very rabid Trump supporting from them a couple of years ago, but I haven't seen anything recently. And then there's some toxic comments about LGBT people. The thing is that when you publicly say things like Derick did, a lot of his mess has been on Twitter. It's an extra step to dial that back, because if you outgrow those beliefs, you have to publicly dial back what you've said and apologize. So I always wonder if Derick doesn't already regret, for example, what he said to Jazz, but if he deconstructs those beliefs, if he changes his heart, he has to also change his Twitter feed. If he deconstructs that, he has to publicly apologize, and that's scary because he's outing himself as an advocate. He's put himself in a position where he is either a transphobe or a repentant ally. And maybe he's outgrown being a transphobe, but he's not ready to be a repentant ally. So he is stuck with what he said like 4 years ago.
Yeah, and I mean, it's different if you say those things if you're in the public eye versus if you're not in the public eye, because if you're not in the public eye, you can just be like, oh, I'm gonna delete my account and then start a new one, and like no one knows.
Right.
You know?
And Derick has put himself in a position where that is not an option for him because the internet is forever. So that's not a good excuse for allowing your previous transphobic statements to stand. And I know that that is not an acceptable excuse to our trans listeners, but I get the feeling that that could be what's going on with him. And our listeners who don't have cult experience might not understand, or you might understand why this is scary and why it's hard. But I've been there, and that's my reasoning behind still having a lot of hope for Jill and Derick. Oh, I did want to say, if you want to learn, if you want to learn more about the Christian response to homelessness, I'm jumping backwards a little bit, but please follow Kevin Nye on Twitter. It's Kevin M Nye NYE1. So Kevin M NYE1. So just to kind of wrap up Jill and Derick, they've copped to drinking alcohol on Instagram.
Scandalous.
They famously did an advertisement for a Christianized version of the Kama Sutra.
Wait, they did an advertisement for this?
Yes. It was like a Christian marriage subscription box or something. They've also bragged about their sex life in like Instagram lives.
Oh, that's,
I mean, like, good for them, but also,
I don't know. I feel like if you brag about it, then it's probably like maybe a bit of overcompensation.
Well, Derick has consistently just been messy on Twitter about the money for Counting On as well. Derick has he's liked tweets about Jim Bob taking all the money from 19 Kids and Counting and not giving the children any of it, even after they were adults. He specifically said that the birth of their first child, they never saw the money from that. And that's shitty. Like, they went through the experience of having the birth filmed, and I would be really, really mad if I had to go through all that and didn't get the money from it. To end this on a positive note, Jill and Derick do practice some kind of birth control. They haven't made public what exactly, but they have said that they are purposely spreading out their children, and they don't intend on having a mega huge family. And their 2 kids go to regular public school, which I think is excellent, because if Jill and Derick never fully let go of some of their beliefs, at least we know that their kids are exposed to outside opinions and will hopefully have space to form their own beliefs. Jill and Derick announced that they had a miscarriage in October 2021. They are now pregnant again. They just announced this week that it was a boy that they're expecting, and Jill is due in July of 2022.
Mazel tov to the happy couple.
And may they continue to grow. I hope I did a good job of explaining why I have hope for them, because I recognize the situation that Derick has put himself into, where he is now in a situation where he must be all the way on one side or the other. So it very well could be that another couple years pass and then we get a public apology from him and a complete change of heart. And it'll look like it's overnight, but actually it took 6 years.
Yeah, you know what? I think that the lesson to take from this is, if you have an opinion about something that's not really any of your business, then maybe don't share that publicly, or
you do not have to have an opinion about everything.
There's a lot of issues that I see. I'm just like, I am not touching that with a 10-foot pole. No, thank you. I'm not in the position to learn enough about that to really feel like I have the right opinion about it.
So speaking of things that you wouldn't want to touch with a 10-foot pole,
Josh's computer keyboard.
No, it's a router cable.
Oh God. Oh.
So the next Duggar to get married was Jessa, and she married Ben Seewald.
They're the couple from the mini golf episode. I know that.
Yes. So in my mind, it was either Jill and Derick or Ginger and Jeremy, but I looked it up for this episode, and you're right, it was Ben and Jessa. I'll tell you what, do you want to describe this mini golf incident for any listeners who have not been blessed to see the video?
Absolutely. This video, I guess it is a clip from 17, 16, 14, 13, 12, 19, 1,000 kids and counting, however many they were at the time. It is one of the few clips of the show that I am actually familiar with, that I have actually seen. It is vomit-inducing. It is a scene in which Jimothy Bobbert, and Michelle are out playing mini golf with Jessa and Ben. Jessa and Ben are not yet married, and Jim Bob is asking Ben how he feels about experimenting with kissing. Yeah, that's his words, not mine.
Did you get the vision of Ben in like a little scientist coat? Oh.
Yeah, just, he's experimenting with kissing. I feel like that's what he does. After dark, he puts the computer on incognito mode and types in kissing videos on kisshub.com.
Hopefully he gets that video of the couple who, the famous like cringy first kiss video.
Oh yeah. Oh God. I know what you're talking. Oh God, it's burned into my mind. Anyway, he's asking them about experimenting with kissing and experimenting with hand holding, and Ben, yeah, I know, Ben being put on what grip do you use if you're experimenting? What grip do you go with? You go with fingers interlocked, or just like high five style, or like hands clasping style, like the meme. I don't know. That's like technique. You got to go with the different. Anyway, Ben is put on the spot, and he has got to give his future potential father-in-law that he's trying to impress, a fundie-approved answer for this question. And so Jim Bob and Michelle, meanwhile, are engaging in some PDA to, in Jim Bob's words, show the kids what is waiting for them after they are married. I have to commend Ben on keeping his cool in a very uncomfortable looking situation.
Jessa just literally couldn't handle it. She just walked away at one point.
Yeah, they did the cutaway where she was talking to the camera, and she was just like,
it's so bad.
Yeah, like if you like cringe, This video is a cringe goldmine. I'll put, it's like Scott's Tots level cringe. Okay. It's like,
I feel completely confident in saying that this is the most cringe Duggar moment of all time. Also, I feel like Jessa's courtship is where Jim Bob's weird possessiveness over his daughter's bodies is the most evident. He may very well have been like that in all of the courtships, but this is the one where it really comes to the forefront.
Yeah, like Ben did eventually marry Jess. Like he is currently married to Jessa. So he must have given adequate enough answers to be deemed suitable by Jim Bob. So that begs the question, what did this young man, Ben Seewald, do to make Jimothy Bobbert find him so appealing?
So Ben and Jessa met because his family was traveling through the area. And like Justin talks about on I Pray You Put This Journal Away, the Duggars held church at their home, and Ben's family visited that home church while going through the area. Ben and Jessa kind of immediately caught each other's eye, and then Ben made friends with two of her brothers so that he would have an excuse to keep visiting the Duggars more often, and I guess that's kind of cute.
That's actually somewhat normal, though.
So, yeah, like that's a taste of normalcy that we won't get too much more in this relationship. Ben eventually asked Jim Bob if he could court his daughter, and Jim Bob called Jessa into the room so that Ben could ask her, which gave us one of the other cringiest Duggar moments. I actually want to play audio of this because I feel like people will be able to get an experience even without the visual component.
Well, we've been praying and talking for a little while, and I was just wondering if you wanted to make it official and if you wanted to officially court me.
Yes.
Hey, I'll tell you what. You can go ahead and give him a sign if you want to. 30 seconds. 3 seconds, I mean.
I am literally gagging right now, dude.
I tell you what, why don't you give her a side hug? And then like 4 seconds later, he's like, 3 seconds, honey.
3 seconds.
He's literally timing their hugs. There are other clips of Ben and Jessa talking about limiting themselves to side hugs, hello and goodbye, and each hug is timed at 30 seconds.
That's like side hug worthy of you being dragged in front of the HAC disciplinary committee for an interrogation from Ken Scop.
It's, I mean, 31 seconds would be sinful.
31 seconds. Like,
only 30 seconds.
You know, like it's just like how it hiles in. Like somebody's out in like the bushes with a stopwatch timing how long you're having a one-on-one conversation with a man to see.
Yes, because 9 minutes and 59 seconds is friendly, but over 10 minutes is a date.
Yeah. Oh man, you know how like a watch is a common birthday gift or like a Father's Day gift?
Yeah.
Like last year, I got my father like a watch. You know, he told me he needed a new watch because it's broken, so I got him one for Father's Day. Nothing like horribly expensive or anything. But I got him a new watch. Like, I wonder if like you'd get Jim Bob like a new watch for Father's Day, and like he'd get really into like the chronograph watch, like the chronograph feature, so that he can get like a super accurate timing when he's timing. When he's timing his daughter's side hugs.
So I think that Ben and Jessa have one of the strongest physical connections of all of these couples. You can see it in their body language, but they also put stricter limits on themselves than even some of the other couples did. And I think that that's showing that they really felt that physical chemistry, and they felt like they needed to be extra careful not to quote-unquote sin. What Jim Bob liked so much about Ben is that he came to live on Duggar property and do work for Jim Bob for a while he was courting Jessa.
Just like we were talking about earlier with Jacob in the book of Genesis.
Right, but Jim Bob only made Ben work for 1 year, and he didn't switch Jessa with another daughter. There are persistent rumors about Ben and Jessa during this time. Oh, specifically that they knew where Jim Bob's outdoor cameras were and they could sneak around the cameras and make out. I can't find hard evidence for or against this, but if they did, all I really have to say is good for them.
Yes, because secret forbidden love is like 1,000 times hotter than regular love. But I want to back up to something because you said, so Jim Bob's got outdoor cameras.
I can't remember who specifically posted this original rumor, but it was someone on Reddit who seemed legit and said they had a connection to the Duggar family. Yeah, whoever posted said that there were cameras, and on one hand, lots of people have cameras outside their house. There were cameras on the church property I grew up on because there were some break-ins while we were in church. But also, I wouldn't put it past Jim Bob to put up cameras just to make sure there were no 31-second side hugs going on. So the courtship proposal that we listened in on was extremely awkward, like skin-crawlingly awkward. But unpopular opinion alert, I thought Ben and Jessa's engagement was pretty cute. Ben had a treasure hunt, like scavenger hunt thing set up for Jessa where she would get a clue and then she would have to figure out that clue and go to the next location, and then there would be another clue there, and so on and so forth. Eventually, the clues led to a chapel where Ben had candles and rose petals set up down the aisle and proposed to her on one knee. I know this isn't for everybody. Some people find the idea of an all-day proposal event exhausting, but I thought this was kind of sweet. So Jessa made waves by wearing a pink dress for her wedding. It was a very light blush pink, and it might be my favorite of the Duggar wedding dresses. I don't know, Ginger's was also pretty good. Ginger's had a train and a huge veil, and I am very, very pro train and huge veil. But Jessa's dress was legitimately beautiful. They also chose to leave and have their first kiss in private instead of in front of literally 1,000 people, which I respect.
So wouldn't that cast doubt on the theory that Ben and Jessa have been sneaking off to do secret kissing on parts of the Duggar compound?
See, I think it actually could support the theory because,
really,
like I said, these two have the strongest physical chemistry of any Duggar couple, in my opinion. So I think if they were sneaking off to make out, they didn't want to do their first kiss in front of all those people because they might look too experienced and give themselves away.
Remember when Heather got in trouble for being too polite to zip off cargo shorts boy at the ATI training center?
Exactly. So now I'm done with the cute stuff because this is where it starts getting weird. The pastor for Ben and Jessa's wedding had Jim Bob and Michelle demonstrate a kiss for the audience. Lest they be disappointed. He was like, oh, so now you'll get to see a Duggar kiss today. So this continues the weird trend of Jim Bob seeming to have his relationship with his wife just a little too intertwined with Jessa and Ben.
That's low-key kind of super gross. And by low-key, I mean high-key. The audience is going to be extremely disappointed if they don't see some serious kissing. Like, it
is gross, but also this is a fundie thing. I remember going to fundie weddings, like how is the first kiss going to be, was a spectator sport.
Really?
Yeah.
So people are like, oh man, is he going to like miss and like chomp her nose? Or
yes. And fundies they don't gamble, but there would be like a bet taking environment where you'd be like, oh, well, I think it's going to be super long and he's going to dip her over backwards. And then somebody else would be like, oh, I think they're just going to do a little peck on the lips. And then like it was very, very voyeuristic, but the fundies don't know that.
I think he's going to get his tongue all the way into her eyeball. That's, they've never done it before. That's what's going to happen, man.
There was very much like that culture of I am here to see the kiss, and then you judge quietly, like, oh, do you think that was really their first kiss? So
wow. So like, if he goes to dip her and he drops her, that is that a thing that you ever saw?
No.
Okay.
I do remember grooms being nervous about that, but I never saw it happen. So Jessa and Ben were gone for that first kiss for quite a few minutes. So if they had been doing some sneaky kissing previous to the wedding, maybe they went to seal the deal, so to speak. Again, I wouldn't really blame them, even if I'm snarking.
Or maybe it was that their first kiss went so poorly that like Jessa lost a contact lens and they had to find it before coming back.
That's totally possible. It's totally possible that it was their first kiss and they just wanted to kiss for a little bit, which is fine. So among the 1,000 guests, Jessa and Ben did have some interesting people. Kirk Cameron was in attendance.
Wow. Bona fide movie star Kirk Cameron. He's like the closest thing that the fundies have to a real celebrity. I'm impressed.
Guess who else was there? Someone who thinks they're a real celebrity.
Was it J-Rod?
got it in one guess. Jill and the whole Rodriguez clan were there. And this was the last Duggar wedding where she acted like a somewhat normal fundie person. But we'll get to that in the next episode.
How many people usually come to these weddings, though? Right? Because like if you're planning a fundie wedding and you're on a budget, are you going to have to make cuts to like certain figures? Just like, man, they have like 12 kids. I like them, but you know, like they're head to head with this other family that's got like 8 kids.
No, because if it's a fundie wedding, it doesn't matter how many people show up because they don't have catered dinners. They have like
it's a potluck.
Yeah, they have like a potluck if they have real food at all. Otherwise, a lot of times it's just finger foods and cake. So they really only need to know roughly how many people are going to be there for the cake. And a lot of fundies will have somebody in the church who can make a wedding cake, so they don't buy cake from a bakery that costs like $500. They get somebody in the church to do it.
That's nice.
It is nice.
That sounds like way better than like
a super expensive cake. So they will have like cake and punch and finger foods or cake and punch and potluck. So it's not, they don't have to plan how many seats they need at the reception. But there's no seating charts at fundie weddings. There's just a general idea of like, oh, we're going to have between 100 and 150 people here. So growing up, if there was a wedding at the church, it's just all the church members who are invited. And then like any friends that the couple has from Hyles Anderson or wherever they met. Generally, just anyone in the church who was free on that day would show up. Pastors and well-known people in the fundie world, it becomes more of a royal wedding vibe where they have to, like, when there's a royal wedding, they have to invite the kings and queens of all these other places and whatnot. The pastors have to invite like all their pastor friends and their families and so on and so forth. And since the Duggars are all about being connected to everyone in the fundie world, they have to invite everyone that they know. So Duggar weddings in particular tend to be around 1,000 people.
I wonder if Jim Bob has to like grant wishes on the day of his daughter's wedding, like Don Corleone.
Jim Bob wishes. So Ben Seewald, he is ordained and apparently pastoring a church. I looked up at the church and I'm a little bit confused because the website says that they adhere to the Baptist Faith and Message 2000, which is a Southern Baptist document. But I also looked for the church in the directory on the Southern Baptist Convention website, and the church didn't show up there. So I think they're actually Independent Baptist.
So how does that work then? Is it just like their IFB, but they go by like Southern Baptist like teaching?
I don't know. I'm really confused. The differences between an average IFB church and a conservative-leaning Southern Baptist church can be pretty few. It's more like it's differences in the rules, but less differences in the doctrine, and the Baptist Faith and Message is a doctrinal document. So, like, Southern Baptist churches forbid, like, they don't forbid women wearing pants at all. While they may expect women to wear dresses only for church, Southern Baptist churches generally embrace modern worship music alongside the old-fashioned hymns. Southern Baptist churches would generally allow members to see movies at their own discretion. They wouldn't preach against owning a TV. They would just preach against, like, quote-unquote bad TV shows. They're just not as focused on a strict lifestyle as a way of avoiding sin. And Southern Baptist churches might practice thought control or emotion control, but it's a lot less likely that any individual SBC church does compared to any individual IFB church. But the actual doctrinal beliefs, like about scripture and church, are almost exactly the same. And you also have to remember that independent Baptist churches are independent. It is not a denomination. So it's broad. Like, independent fundamental Baptist generally means certain things, but there are always exceptions to that. I skimmed through the Baptist Faith and Message, and it was surprisingly conservative, actually. It takes a strong stance against female clergy, against homosexuality, of course. Ben's church takes it a step further in their statement of faith on the church website. That statement of faith says that even, and this is a quote, the intent or desire to surgically alter one's biological natural-born sex to a different sex is, quote, sinful. So even the thought of transitioning or recognizing that you are or might be trans is a sin, and I would definitely call that thought control.
None of that stuff is stuff that we want to hear, of course. Here's a question, though. So, like, Ben's a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
How old is he? How old was he when he started pastoring this church?
So Ben is 26, about to turn 27. He was born in May 1995, and yes, that does make me feel old. He got married in 2014, so he was 19 at the time of the wedding. He just started pastoring, though, last year after going to seminary. He went to college originally for political science, but then changed course and went to Moody Bible Institute for seminary.
So I don't know if like the fundie world is different. I don't know, but like I can't imagine being a church member and like my church needs a new pastor and a 25-year-old kid comes in and says, I'm ready to be a pastor. I've studied theology long enough and I have enough life experience to apply it and teach it in ways that will be spiritually fulfilling to you.
In fundie world, 25 isn't unusual to start pastoring. Lots of people graduate from Hyles Anderson at like 21 or 22 and then get married and then immediately go to start a church or pastor a small church. I'm more appalled by the marriage at 19.
Like when I was 25, though, I thought I was mature. I was a f***ing idiot.
No offense, Gavi, but men are just not done until they're 30. I've never known a man under 30 who was a grown-up. Jonathan was 30 exactly when we met, and I was like, I don't know, he might be a little bit too young for me.
You know what, though? Like, I'm not mad at that. Like, I'm gonna be 30 in like a year, and I feel like I'm not quite done. You know what I'm saying? Like, maybe I've finished baking, but I'm not out of the oven and I'm still like cooling on the stove. So you don't want to touch the pan yet. Like you might get.
I really believe in the person that you are going to grow into. I love watching your personal growth. It's more exciting to me than any sports game except for like the Iron Bowl. But seriously, watching somebody that I care about grow and thrive is so exciting for me. And I'm really down with that description of like being out of the oven, but still cooling on the stove. You don't want to cut bread when it's fresh out of the oven. You like the top might be brown, but you want to give it a few minutes to let the inside finish cooking and let some of the steam evaporate. And then it's perfect.
Sadie, did you just make an oven joke at me? That's anti-Semitic.
You started this. You started that joke.
Oh, just because you heard me say it, it's okay for you to say it. How dare you?
I'll have you know, I have Jewish friends.
Yeah, me.
And
okay.
So shut it. There was a comment on the Duggar family blog that I found questioning whether Ben was old enough to pastor, very much the same concerns that you just expressed. And someone gave us the fundie justification directly, so I don't even have to tell you what it is. Someone said he can give the same counsel that any pastor can give by pointing people to Jesus. So there's the fundie justification.
Like if you're a pastor and somebody comes to you for counseling and it's an issue that you haven't personally experienced and you're not in the place in your life to understand like what it even is that they're talking, like even comprehend the problem that they have, how are you going to do that?
Well, you just tell them to pray about it and read their Bible more. And if it's a money problem, you grill them about whether or not they've been tithing. That's pretty much it.
That's it. I mean, he's 26 though, or like, just like this is not a man. Like this man does not have a bottle of Advil on his bedside table. Okay, I bet he wakes up in the morning and he doesn't even have like weird neck pain. You know, for like no reason. You know what I'm saying? Like you ever wake up, you have weird neck pain for no reason, and sometimes it goes away by 10 a.m. and sometimes it's just there forever.
Right.
Yeah, no, I bet he can drink 16 ounces of whole milk and not even get like bloated and have bad stomach pain. You know?
Yep.
No, I bet like this is the thing. Like he sits down on like a chair, like on a couch or something. I bet he doesn't even go, if you don't do that, I don't want to hear from you. Okay. I'm only 2 years older than this guy. He doesn't like, if he doesn't do any of that, like, don't tell me you have any life experience. You don't know what it is, man. Like,
so I'm going to revisit the question of
child. He's a child.
You're 3 years older than him. 2 years older.
Yeah. And I'm not done yet.
Okay, fair.
I only figured out I'm lactose intolerant this year. He still has to go through that. Here's a question. Does he have hair still?
Yes.
I had to go through realizing that I don't get to have hair anymore. He hasn't gone through that. He is a child. He is a small child. He is a small baby. Dude, I bet Ben is so young that he doesn't even think 11 at night is late.
I mean, he's got a bunch of kids, so maybe he does.
Him, man, he doesn't know. He is a child. He can't tell me about my life, man. He's not out here in these streets doing it, living life.
2 years younger than us. Okay.
Yeah, he's 2 years younger than I'm still basically a child, man.
So I want to back up.
I'm in like 8th grade and he's a fucking 6th grader. He doesn't even know where babies come from yet. He got them by accident.
I'm pretty sure he knows because he's got 4.
Well, it could be like a Ben Shapiro situation. You know what I'm saying? Like,
he's got the vibe. A lot of but I mean, he went to school for political science. He was originally going to try to be a politics boy, and then he changed his mind.
It's not an excellent vibe to have. Is the vibe of Ben Shapiro.
So I want to revisit really quickly the issue of like IFB or not IFB, and then we'll get to some questionable decisions that people make when they have children at a very young age. So Jessa has been seen wearing pants, and I brought that up to finish out the IFB or not conversation because every other sign points to Independent Baptist, but that puts a question in my mind because I've never known an Independent Baptist church that was affiliated with the IFB movement and IFB group of churches that would allow a pastor's wife to wear pants. So that's what really puts a question in my mind. I don't know. If I find out, I'll tell you at some point whether you want to find out or not. Ben and Jessa also have 4 children, and here's the questionable decision. The first child they named Spurgeon.
Spurgeon.
I
don't know. Spurgeon sounds like it should be the name of like a character from SpongeBob SquarePants. You know, like it rhymes with sturgeon.
So it's after Charles Spurgeon, who was a famous preacher. And fair enough to name your kid after a historical figure who's inspiring to you. There were a couple of names like that on my list for Chuck. I cannot understand why they didn't just go with Charles. His middle name is Elliot, which is after Jim Elliot, that missionary pilot who flew onto an island where he wasn't wanted and got killed by the indigenous people there, which isn't someone I'd name my child after. But Elliot in itself is a perfectly fine name. Which once again prompts me to ask why not Elliot Spurgeon Seewald, or Charles Elliot Seewald, or Elliot Charles Seewald. Literally any other combination would have worked.
You know, if you translate Spurgeon Elliot Seewald into the language of the indigenous tribe of that island, it means he who f***ed around and found out.
So Jessa posts funny things that Spurgeon says to her Twitter, and sometimes things that he said that she thought were funny. The most recent example I could find was, here's the quote. I was about to kill a wasp that I'd found on the kitchen windowsill, but then Spurgeon spoke up. The Bible says love your enemies, and that could mean even wasps because they sting. So maybe we should just let it out the window.
You know those Facebook posts from people, parents who want to brag about how precocious their young children are? And so they say like, my 3-year-old just said, the unexamined life is not worth living. I am so proud that my child is old enough to be reading Socrates. Like, you know,
yeah, it very much has that vibe. The old like Jimmy Carter asking his daughter about nuclear nonproliferation thing. Like your kid didn't say that. Yeah, like your kid didn't say that. And if your kid did say that, it's because children are sponges and they will repeat whatever it is that you talk about.
The subreddit that happened.
Yes. Yeah, very much that. Another example of a hashtag sayings of Spurgeon tweet that feels less like indoctrination. As we were riding in the car, Henry announced from the back seat, number 1 is pee and number 2 is poop. Spurgeon corrected, matter-of-factly, Actually, number 1 is toot, number 2 is pee, number 3 is poop, and number 4 is diarrhea.
Okay, that feels like something that a kid would say.
That feels like the kind of thing that a kid would say that I wouldn't personally be jazzed about putting on the internet, because that's just
I
like
think that's funny.
I mean, number 1 is just the thing that kids say.
When you feel there's something brown and it's something down, diarrhea.
Yep.
Diarrhea. Yeah.
Speaking of you still being a child.
Jingle bells, Batman smells, Robin laid. And
As mentioned, the next kid is Henry Wilberforce, after Matthew Henry and William Wilberforce. Wilberforce is still incredibly awful, but at least they stuck it as the middle name instead of having kids running around named Spurgeon and Wilberforce.
I don't know, man. Wilberforce is like kind of cool. It sounds like an army of farmers. Like it could be like we have the Wilberforce, we have the Caleb Battalion, and we have a Special Strike Team Maynard.
I'm prepared to give them a pass on this one. If you're going to stick your kid with a weird name, make it the middle name. It's way more acceptable. The 2 daughters are Ivy and Fern, which are perfectly nice names. No notes. Ivy Jane and Fern Eliana. Perfectly fine. Jessa is known for having home births with her first 3 kids, but she had complications with 2 out of the 3. So in a show of common sense, the 4th kid was born in a hospital. Jessa is also homeschooling her kids, but she's shown images of their curriculum, and it isn't wisdom booklets.
Isn't wisdom booklets.
It's not. So they may still be or become an ATI family by also using wisdom booklets, but we do know that that's not the only curriculum that she's using. So that's something.
But if they're not using wisdom booklets, then how will they know which bird is best? Like whether vultures are superior to eagles.
I don't know. They may miss out on that crucial piece of knowledge.
Oh my God. Sadie, do you know what I just realized?
What?
I just realized that every ATI wisdom booklet is just written by like Dwight Schrute.
Oh my God. Bears, beats, better birds. Birds are best.
Birds are no, like the whole ranking vulture is above, like ranking which birds are best in the eight, like it's the same energy as which bear is best.
That is
is Bill Gothard actually just Dwight from The Office?
I mean, kind of
weird. He's a weirdo.
Yeah, he's a weirdo. He likes to control women. He's all about like breeding things.
And like superior genetics and like
yeah, but Dwight doesn't have a well documented foot fetish, so point against him for that.
No, but Dwight is known to actually have like successfully copulated with a human female, so
consensually.
Yeah, like on purpose.
Yeah. See, I cannot answer the question of whether Bill Gothard and Dwight Schrute are the same person. I can tell you that I did Chuck's hair like Dwight when I got her out of the bath the other day, and it was really funny.
Man, okay.
So Ben, when he was an aspiring pastor, he knew this guy, Jeremy Vuolo, and he introduced Jeremy to the Duggar family, and that's how we got our next Duggar couple, Jeremy and Ginger, who we will start with next week.
Yes. Today's episode is over. This episode has gone very long, but it's been a fun one. It's been a good time. Next week, we are going to get snug with the Dugg again. We were talking about all the people who get snug with the Duggs.
All of the legal adult human beings who looked themselves in the mirror on one fine morning and said to themselves, yes, marrying into this family is a good decision, and I will definitely not regret it.
No regrets. That's
no Duggrets.
God. No, oh my God, no Duggrets. That's incredible.
That seems incredible because it is way too late at night. Thank you for sticking with us through this episode.
If you are a fan of the show, if you like our show, and you want to hear a version of this episode that's even longer than the one that you already just listened to, you can subscribe to our Patreon, which is patreon.com/Leaving Eden Podcast. You can join our Facebook group, which is facebook.com/groups/Eden Exodus. You can join our subreddit, which is reddit.com/r/Eden Exodus. Please if you have mission stories, so a story of something that happened to you, just some wild that happened while you were on a missions trip, or some wild that you heard somebody claim happened to them on a missions trip that you're like, there is no way that's true, or if it is, holy what on earth, please send it to us in an email at leavingedenpod@gmail.com, and we will feature your story in a future episode if we find it spicy enough.
Thank you to all of our Patreon subscribers, and especially to our Faith Promise Missions subscribers. And we'll come back next week with more Duggar in-laws.
Yeah, you can follow the podcast on Facebook at Leaving Eden Podcast, on Instagram at Leaving Eden Podcast, on Twitter at Leaving Eden Pod. Sadie, would you like to plug your social media?
Yep, you can follow me on Instagram at Sadie Carpenter Music. You can follow me on Twitter at Hell Yes Sadie, and you can follow me on TikTok at Sadie Carpenter 1.
And you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at GavrielHacohen. And until next time, bye-bye.
But